And good evening from Philadelphia. This is Frank here.
James coming in from New York.
And this is UFO News Network Sunday, coming to you in an evening edition with something a little different for us, a roundtable. But we were able to get everybody on. Everybody's here checking in. And James, I will leave the intros to you.
All right, thank you. So this is basically a confirmation panel based on our Twitter circle. We have a Twitter circle of some pretty serious researchers who kick around information, ideas, sometimes speculation. And we get into it pretty heavy, and we trade a lot of great information, make some good connections by working together. So we're having this confirmation Twitter circle panel. I'm going to let everybody do their own intro to introduce themselves because they can do it better than I can, to be honest.
All right, and just because we've got a lot of people here, we'll get the voices straight. James and I have the glorious East Coast accents, and let's start. Let's start with Jay because he's over in good old England, and I think you'll be able to recognize that that is his location as he introduces himself. So go, Jay. Tell the folks all about yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Jay, otherwise known as Twitter user Jay.
There we go.
My actual Twitter handle is J09784691. It's a bit of a mouthful, just how it is. I've kept it that way. I quite like it. It's a bit anonymous, and I prefer to stay that way. I engaged with the community quite recently, despite having been a lurker for many years. And I made a little bit of a splash with the Chris Mellon leak. So I found the documents on Chris Mellon's website, published them on Twitter, and created a little bit of a storm there. And I've been researching all of the scientific papers from NIDS and various different scientists involved in the subject.
Fantastic. And let's go to the west of us. So that we've already covered the east. To the west of us, we've got Danny Silva.
I'm so happy to be here with my friends. This is amazing. I'm a phenomena blogger, UFO and related phenomena. I'm from Texas, and formerly with UAPinfo.net, and I got a new website coming up. It's called Silva Record, SILVA record.com, and I'm just passionate for searching for the truth, and super obsessed with To the Stars Academy, ATIP, anything Bigelow, anything related like that.
Got it. And Joe Murgia joining us all the way from Las Vegas, Bob Bigelow's stomping grounds. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Oh, thank you guys for doing this. This is good. I'm really excited about this. From New York, been in Vegas for a while. I'm in Houston for a long time shooting a reality show for Animal Planet. And I have my Twitter handle is UFOJoe11. And I have a website, UFOJoe.net. where I'm doing a lot of transcribing lately because I love to transcribe interviews and try to find out information that a lot of people may have missed. And I'm obsessed with the subject.
Fantastic. So let's get things rolling. How's the last year been for you? Pretty exciting or what?
For me?
For everybody.
Yeah, definitely exciting. Yeah, I think since the initial announcements that we had last October, for TTSA and then over to the video releases in December. I think it's been incredible. It's the reason why I interacted with the community.
So
the last year has changed my life totally. I always had beliefs about this kind of thing, and then to hear it from actual government sources, it was a shock to say the least. And now I'm open to other things that I never thought I would be open to. All this physics stuff, portals, and all these other things that I probably won't mention right now. But I have a saying that, and I think everything is real.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I think one of the biggest points of, I guess what we can consider what Bigelow had called years ago when he was on an interview with George Knapp is confirmation. And I mean, right now it's apparent that we're in that stage. The mainstream media is reporting on UFOs and UAPs in a completely different manner than they have in many years in the past. And an important thing that's going on right now that's part of this is actually not so much. I mean, there is a lot of stuff coming out now for sure, but it's a lot of it. This is based going back a few years ago, and it's uncovering stuff that's been going on in the last 2 decades concerning the subject and the government's involvement in it in the studies. And that's one aspect of it. And you have Skinwalker Ranch, and how even me, I had no idea that Skinwalker Ranch played such a critical role in the government's UFO study. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, that's incredible. That Skinwalker Ranch was the impetus for OSAP, even though I think it was either Corbell or Knapp who mentioned that ATIP kind of was already there. It has been there for years, and it wasn't under. I mean, it's kind of confusing how he explains it. I think he probably can't diverge too much, but he talks about how ATIP was already kind of there. There were people in different agencies trading informations, and they have this entire database, which is, filled with all this information, except it wasn't under the official banner as far as he knew as ATIP. But when OSAP came around, it kind of gave ATIP the green light to become an official program funded and organized in such a manner. So,
yeah, for sure. I think it's been quite fascinating ever since the initial announcement came out. We've had all kinds of documentation that's come from the group, TTSA, since Tom DeLonge set up this company. We have all these different former government officials working for TTSA. And we've got these documents, we've had the DIRD reports come out. We had this list of reports. There's all kinds of stuff that they've been looking into, things from communication, wormholes. I mean, absolutely fascinating stuff. And I really think the whole subject seems to be accelerating and becoming more mainstream. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And it's great to see this kind of stuff coming through from New York Times as well. But even those documents that we found from the Mellon's website, we're finding documents, presentations and stuff that were present from ATIP, and it's got some fascinating details in there, really, really fascinating. I'm really happy to see that we're finally getting these details through. I'm kind of hoping at some point soon we'll get the BAS studies so we can have a look.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of find out some of the relating scientists and stuff.
I mean, so another, people maybe haven't focused on this as much, Jay, or I should call you Twitter user Jay. But I mean, the Mellon leak was one thing. That was awesome, of course. But the NIDS papers that you pulled out, I mean, that was amazing too. That's incredible stuff that's in there. And
Corbell, I think some of that's been available for a while, though. When I was speaking to Danny about it, so I posted some of this stuff onto Twitter. I think Danny contacted me afterwards and said, this stuff has been available for a while. But obviously the website was up at some point in the past. I don't know when it originally was created, but I was pulling up the lists, I think from early 2000, something like 2004, something along those kind of lines. And it had all of these reports that were present. And some of the stuff is, it's absolutely fascinating, really, really incredible. And it kind of changes the picture of how I perceive the entire subject, really. I don't see it as a nuts and bolts UFO thing where we've got these craft coming from Zeta Reticuli or whatever. That might be the case as well. Like James, you've mentioned in the past, you think that's probably a bit of the element too. But it seems to be there's something more to it, something a bit more esoteric, almost like there's another sort of world that kind of exists next to this one. And there's some sort of crypto-terrestrial sort of element or some sort of intelligence that's part of that. So that's the kind of bit that's really got me going quite recently, is finding these reports on the NIDS website that deal with consciousnness and talk about this kind of subject. There's some really fascinating stuff in there. And then you kind of go back and you look to things like the Mundus Imaginalis. It's been going around for years, really, the kind of whole sort of esoteric teachings, but it's really good to see that kind of stuff being studied by these different types of groups.
Yeah, and I think that, as we go forward and the nature of the phenomenon is unveiled more and more, and its mysterious nature, I think that we're going to see more of an interest in those kind of subjects. And, Jacques Vallée highlights that this phenomenon seems to have been with us. And I think even George Knapp mentioned that the possibility of it being, right here, just we can't see it at times, but when it wants to, it could take on a form in our reality and interact with us as he I think as he jokes, it can come in and watch us when it wants to. It's an incredible phenomenon, and it's an incredible thing to explore, kind of how it's really pushing the boundaries of what we think we know in science and looking back at history.
And back to the NIDS site, what was really cool about it was you had comments from Bigelow on there, and you had all these scientific papers. Everything just seemed really open. I would love for a website like that to be around these days, but it seems like we probably won't get it because the information is a little bit more guarded. But just everything was out there on the NIDS site back then.
Yeah, we even had stuff on Skinwalker Ranch, talking about the cattle mutilations. It's got statistics, it's got figures, it's got all kinds of stuff in there. Got reports and consciousness studies. We've got the traditional kind of UFO type papers. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible the amount of stuff that was present on that website, and really fascinating to see it there, and quite how it got maybe so overlooked at the time. I don't know, but it's incredible to be able to access some of those reports.
Has everyone had the chance to see the Jeremy's movie about Skinwalker?
Yes.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Thoughts? I mean, I know I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a little bit more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Again, to tell you the truth.
Same here.
I found it very enjoyable.
Yeah.
I like that. The extras were great. The Napa interview was great. It's good stuff, and it's something that now we can talk to people that aren't interested in the subject and have them see it, and they're gonna, get a briefing on what was going on. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I thought George was really the star of the show. It was very interesting how they interpolated some of the old tapes that he had together, where he was doing basically a straight narration, and then other parts of the film he was sort of being a little bit more himself, doing interviews. And both Naps did a very nice job in that movie.
Yeah, I watched it with some friends like a week ago, and they were not really interested, but they were willing to watch it with me. So I'm like, yeah, just give it a shot. And they love the Nap stuff. They go, he just presents it so clearly. They really enjoy it.
It does.
Really like it.
I think the great thing, it's for Corbell. You see these interviews with him, and this guy can talk really coherently about this stuff. Really, really clearly. So it's really fascinating to see. I mean, I read the book before I saw the film, so I kind of knew what to expect. I think a lot with the film, but it was great. Definitely an enjoyable film.
Yeah, and it put it out there on a platform where millions of people are going to see it and be introduced to it. And, even people that are just kind of looking, oh, wow, that's paranormal kind of thing, are going to see how that this place in the study was tied into a UFO, a government UFO program. Like, what? But another interesting fact is, there were other people involved in Skinwalker that they haven't really been named yet. As because Knapp had said that there were effects on the people who had interactions at the ranch, and he didn't really go much further than that as to what kind of effects. But there was somebody who studied the people that were having the effects from Skinwalker Ranch for the past 5 years, and I think it's somebody we all know, right? And that's Gary Nolan.
Yep.
Gary Nolan.
Yeah, Gary Nolan. Yep. Sorry.
He was studying the effects on the people that were having these interactions at Skinwalker Ranch and attracting these hitchhikers, and they did all the scans and all that stuff, and there were physical elements and effects from the interactions at Skinwalker.
Did you hear that?
Trace.
Where did you hear that, James? Is there anywhere online where they talk about that?
No. Maybe he'll talk about it sometime in the future, but I know it's okay that I can say it.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
And I think that there is some confusion too about where some of these things came from, or where some of maybe the supposed effects came from, whether it was strictly phenomena based, or if it was weird testing by a government agency or something like that.
And that's kind of still a question, because the effects that the people had, there's two effects. You had the hitchhiker effect, which people seem to be followed by a phenomenon.
Right, and how could that be government? don't think
Exactly.
that could be government at all. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the weird part. But the other physical effect was an electromagnetic effect on the brain, which actually produced the white matter in the brain and lesions. But yeah, the part about them being followed home and the phenomenon interacting with individuals, that's another story. That's something else.
And then you have no, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And then Jeremy Corbell, the new owner in the extras, said that some of his personnel were sent to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. And I tried to ask Jeremy about that, and he said, think more like a blood infection, something that gets into the blood, and it's an infection in the whole body, and it can kill you. But he's never seen any evidence that it was caused by phenomena. And I asked him, has the new owner showed you anything that backs it up? I mean, or even just show that they actually were in the hospital? Is there any evidence, any hospital records? And they won't answer that question. I don't know why, if they just don't want to ruffle the new owner's feathers. They just want to keep that relationship going. But I have not gotten an answer from him or George on that.
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting that Lou Elizondo's education history, as listed onto the Stars Academy's website, suggests that he's been studying parasitology, which kind of fits in with the whole hitchhiker hypothesis as well, right? It was something I picked up when I first looked at the website. So when George Knapp was going to interview him, I wanted him to ask him this question: why do you have that education history when you were studying this stuff within the Pentagon? It seems strange. You know what I mean? So I wondered whether or not there was a connection there, and it seems like there might be some sort of connection.
And there's been all these comments about the other To the Stars Academy guys. Help me out, guys. What are they? They are like the bio.
Well, the guy who I find pretty interesting is the guy who keeps the lowest profile. I mean, he keeps a lower profile than Bigelow, and that's Colin Kelleher, because he's on the To the Stars Academy board. And he was also a key guy, obviously, at NIDS, and was interviewed at least a little bit. And that's the first I'd ever really seen of him. He comes across as an awfully nice guy, but man, is he quiet. He doesn't talk much.
I met him at the premiere, and I said, "Oh," he goes, "Hi, I'm Colin Kelleher." I'm like, "I know who you are." He goes, "Who are you?" And I'm like, I'm Joe Murgia. He goes, "I know that name." I'm like, "Nah." I say, "You don't know me. I post stuff on Twitter. You don't know who I am."
And then we got the To the Stars Academy. What is it, NormCon? And he does all the bioweapons, or I can't remember exactly. But there's definitely a lot of different guys that do different things, and I'd like to hear more about why they're involved, because we really 100% don't know.
Yeah, that is pretty strange. We kind of got a vast array of people. I think there's some guy listed on the website involved with some kind of neuro research too.
Paul Rapp, I think, possibly.
Yeah. Yep. So, who knows why that stuff is there? I mean, right now, the focus seems to be the Atom Project and the materials, and they seem to be taking that pretty seriously. And of course, I think Danny, you mentioned that Knapp said something in his recent article about it.
About what? I'm sorry.
About the metamaterials.
Materials. Yeah, the Atom Project.
Oh yeah. In the I-Team, the recent I-Team story where they follow.
Yeah, Danny, you're breaking up a little bit here.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay. Knapp said that we would be getting the some or around that.
Seems to break up every time you're trying to describe what it is, Danny.
Yeah, he's breaking up a little bit here.
It's an interference. It's an interference.
Uh-oh.
Watch out, guys. This must be an NSA transmission.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
I heard that last little bit. I did, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, at the end of the I-Team presentation, the anniversary of To the Stars Academy, he was saying that after the first of the year, there will be an Atom Project announcement. I don't know if that means January, but it's pretty promising. And that goes along with what MUFON's Robert Marsh said Elizondo had told him. So that's basically confirmation of that rumor now.
Yeah, and I wonder how many of the samples that they've got are actually new samples as well, right? Because when they had that original video that went online, it had the page there, and they've since blocked it out. They've re-uploaded the video, so you can't see what's written on the page. But I had an early copy of that video, and I managed to write out all of the text, and it refers to two different samples. There's one that's called Ohio Ed sample, and there's Rendlesham Forest sample. So these are presumably two pre-existing samples that are present at EarthTech, right? So I don't know whether they're part of the Adam project and they're just sort of included the original analyses from those projects, or whether or not all of the samples now, all 7 samples are new.
Yeah, I think that some of these pieces have been floating around, and they have 7 pieces in all. And we also know that Art's Parts, the magnesium bismuth zinc piece, is part of this too. So that's 3 of the pieces right there.
I would expect that some of the Yuba Tuba material might be in there as well. That comes from a crash down in Brazil decades ago, and that stuff has been floating around for quite some time and has gotten some attention. Professor Peter Sturrock is somebody who has spent a lot of time working on that stuff, going back decades. He probably wrote a paper I've got linked at my website back in the very late 90s. So this goes back a ways. And this has been a phenomenon that's been part of the field. It's kind of limited. It doesn't have a lot of material or a lot to talk about. But obviously, you've got 4 scientists on the record between Nolan, Vallée, Puthoff, and Sturrock going back in the day, saying that they think they've got something. They've got something unique here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Some of the samples are. The 2 that I mentioned earlier, I don't think are. When you actually read through that report, it sounds like they're terrestrial. So I can't even say it now. Ohio Ed sample and Rendlesham sample, I think from the description on that paper, are completely terrestrial. It seems to be. When you read down about the different the metals that are included and stuff like that, it doesn't. I don't see anything on the isotopic ratios, but it sounds like there's nothing interesting about them. But in the video again, it shows an implant. It's like a tube that's full of water, and you see this piece of metal within that water, and they've got a magnet along the side of it. Now, I don't really know what the implants are for, but if it works anything like terrestrial technology like we have now, if you apply a magnet to something that has data on it, you essentially remove that data from the device. So hopefully the technology doesn't work in the same way. Otherwise, it would have planked it all off.
Well, you mentioned magnetism, and I do know one of the elements involved in the Art's Parts alloy is bismuth, which is not an especially interesting component to an alloy, in that bismuth is not very strong. The only thing that's really interesting about it is it is the most diamagnetic metal on Earth, which means basically that it rather than attracting metal, being magnetic, actually repels the metal, which I think is kind of interesting. Possibly it might have something to do with propulsion, maybe, I don't know. But it seems like it's too weak a metal to me to be part of any kind of structural metal, like part of a frame, part of a hull, something along those lines. Might have something to do with the propulsion. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, well, I think magnesium is conductive, and I think bismuth is non-conductive, or one of the least conductive metals. So there seems to be almost like conflicting parts to them.
Yeah, and they said that bismuth and magnesium, I think, shouldn't really mix that readily. That the way that they're layered in that piece is part of the kind of strange thing about the piece.
It's the thickness as well, isn't it? Because it's just a few microns thick between each layer.
Microns. And in Linda Moulton Howe, she has a whole, 4-part presentation just on these, on the Art's Parts piece, and she's explaining it, and it's just incredibly, like you said, there's just a few microns thickness of one layer, and then microns thickness of the next. So it's even strange that it's put like that.
My colleague Dregs. My colleague Dregs. He. It's kind of a conspiracy theory, but
that is Chris Wolford, who was supposed to be here today, but I guess he got burned out from his 3-hour marathon appearance on Midnight in the Desert Friday night, so he wasn't able to squeeze us in today. That's him, right?
Oh no,
Dreg. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Dregs. I'm thinking of Deb Guru. I'm sorry. My bad.
Well,
Well, I got to
right.
shout out to Kristen anyway.
Yeah, shout out to Chris, the homie Chris. But Dregs, he's a Twitter user. You'll see him on there. But he's a good friend of mine. And this is a conspiracy theory, but it did blow me away just how simple it is. Is that if there is these metals and they're in the government or in other places or other organizations where they don't want to release them, the fact that To the Stars Academy is accepting things now even anonymously is a perfect way for some of this stuff to come out. So it's just a speculation, but yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. An interesting note too also is that Frank, you mentioned the Uba Tuba piece, which they, Peter Sturrock they did find anomalies in, but Gary Nolan had also said that Jacques Vallée has other pieces that are quite older as well that are even more anomalous, and it's almost blatant that it's some kind of technology. And I think there's going to be more coming out on that sometime next year.
That's really exciting. That not only To the Stars Academy is doing it, but other people are doing it. That's just so exciting to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, and To the Stars is only one group doing this. There's other groups, like Jacques Vallée and Nolan are working on these pieces, and they're coming out with. There's a film coming out. The part in their film is only like a section of the film. It's a bigger film, but it's going to feature their study of the materials in the film. And
wow.
I guess Gary Nolan was able to build some kind of device in his lab that's specifically made to work with cellular biology and that kind of stuff. But it just so happens that the device works very well analyzing materials.
Wow.
So that's and what from what he says is that some of the stuff is fascinating. It's not just run of the mill materials. That's all like this thing's strange. He's saying that some of the materials are pretty astounding. So, but also an interesting note on Peter Sturrock. He studied these materials. He was also, I believe, part of the Rockefeller Initiative, and he was also a consultant on NIDS. That's
he gets around. He's been doing this for a long time, and I had the chance to interview him a few years back, talking about radars being physical evidence for UFOs, and that was a fun article to write, and something I always thought it was nice to get a physicist like Sturrock, who was actually involved in developing early radar systems during World War II back in his home country of England, which. Let's not kid ourselves, Jay. Thanks to radar, that's what allowed you guys to know when those Nazi planes were flying over and get up there and take care of them.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For the actual metals as well, it's quite interesting for a lot of this stuff. There's papers now, so we're getting patents in the US, so in your country. Where you're actually layering different types of metals. It's either different metals or like a different type of material within the metals. And as part of these patents, it says that if they radiate these materials, these metamaterials, with a terahertz frequency or a microwave frequency, depending on the type of material they're using, it gives cloaking abilities, which is fascinating. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of suggesting what these things do is they make the ship invisible somehow. Just mind-blowing, incredible stuff. And this stuff is just available. You look for it, look for these patents, and you can kind of find this detail. Incredible stuff.
And there are currently metamaterials being used, right, in aviation and things like that. And I've asked Jay this before too, and I wish there was a way that we could know if it was extra special metamaterials or kind of more normal ones when we're looking at some of these reports and documents and things like that.
I think anything that we manufacture on Earth is probably likely to be, simpler than anything that we find as part of any type of craft. It's going to be much more complex. I think there were suggestions that you can only do it in zero gravity and all this kind of stuff. Manufacture this stuff, but I don't know too much about it.
And James was just talking about that too, where he pointed out in that great Knapp interview with Phenomena Radio at the end that they were saying that the Bigelow, the space, the inflatable space station, or I don't know, The
Space
habitats, that's
habitat.
right, yeah. And they may be used and for to manufacture some of these metamaterials in zero gravity, which seems to be the case for some of the special metamaterials. At least it's being theorized.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that what Bigelow wants to do is take, let's just say, if we speculate that there is a clandestine, unacknowledged special access program that can create these materials wherever they, do that, if that's even possible. That what Bigelow wants to do is bring it out to the white world and do that publicly sometime in the future, or at least, create the environment where people will be able to have a space station and work out there and maybe possibly develop materials. So that's that's pretty big order. But Bigelow, from some of the comments that Knapp made, he almost made it sound like Bigelow is not working specifically on this anymore after that contract ended with OSAP. That when the project was canned, basically, when the funding was pulled because people were saying that by studying this that they're messing with demons, and also if the public found out that the U.S. government was studying this, it would be an embarrassment. That's one of the things that Knapp talked about as well.
I heard that from a source as well, that that Bigelow's probably is still doing things, but he's definitely doing it a lot more reserved. And the fact that you have contracts with NASA, it just doesn't bode well with those guys when you're going full bore on UFO stuff, at least publicly. So he kind of probably had to back off a little bit, but I'm sure he's still doing some things behind the scenes, though.
I mean, the guy who's now managing Adamantium, is that how you say it? Thomas, I think his name is Thomas Edgerton. You guys know who I'm talking about?
Winterton, maybe?
Winterton. Yeah. And he was at that meeting in the public city council meeting. He said he brought on a new person. So it's clear he didn't, he purposely used the words Bigelow brought on a new person. And they asked him, could you clarify? And the reporter called him up. He's like, I stand by I don't want to comment, but I stand by what I said. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the background. And I'm happy with that. Let him stay in the background. It doesn't bother me. If he needs to do that to keep his NASA work going, I mean, that's fine with me. I mean, I know people are upset that trying to make it a big deal. I'm curious about it, but
I think it's an important thing. I think what he's doing is incredible.
Yeah.
I think Bigelow's really pushed this whole thing forwards. I think without Bigelow, none of this stuff would have happened, is my view.
Yeah, certainly a lot of it. I mean, back, he went on the show with George Knapp, and he talked about confirmation, and he was kind of hinting at this, as George said back then, of some of the stuff that he was doing. He said he had a partner in this, and he was actually talking about the U.S. government, but he couldn't say it.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, people had only heard speculation of Bigelow putting money here, trying to get involved here, but he has done quite a lot.
Well, he initially funded the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, right? Which later went through to Bass. So he funded it privately at first.
Yeah, he owned the place for a little bit there, for a few years.
He donated $5 million to consciousness studies at UNLV in Las Vegas. So I mean, it's a nice little chunk of change to be studying consciousness.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a really important thing. That's the difficult part for me. When I read through all of those reports that he had on the NIDS website, and loads of this stuff that I found recently, I just think it's absolutely key to all of this stuff. It seems to be something like, if you get yourself into a kind of trance-like state, you're able to sort of get yourself almost involved with some other type of reality to a certain extent, like shamanic initiations and all this kind of stuff, the drumming, they're able to push themselves through to these different, these different states. These shamans, when they're drumming, they talked about essentially remote viewing for years and years and years. It's just essentially got overlooked by Western cultures because we just, we looked at it from a totally different perspective. We just thought, we can't measure this objectively, so therefore it's false. But it seems like Western culture is almost catching up with some of these like old traditional beliefs, and there seems to be something in it.
Yeah, I think that, consciousness is definitely at the core of this. Grant Cameron, he goes into that, and some other people, Dr. Stephen Greer, he touches on that a lot, and especially how the phenomenon, and even the phenomenon, if they're using technology, if that is the best way we can describe it, which it seems when these materials are found and they're being tracked, but that their technology interfaces with consciousness.
Yeah.
So consciousness is a huge part of this. And Jay, you had mentioned that there's papers talking about, brain technology interface or something, right?
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So you can, so that was written into a file within the most recent book by A.J. Hartley. He was talking about brain-machine interfaces in that book, and that seems to be something that is actually, there's patents for it. We've got research papers about it, so it's something that's happening, and they're saying it's going to be happening in something like 2040 as part of these papers. But who knows? Maybe some of this stuff is available now. But it's the consciousness stuff again that really interests me. And if we look at stuff like Peter Levender's book, so I think the first book was Gods, right? And it's kind of all relates back. Do you know what I mean? It's all of these historical religions seem to sort of key back into these different conscious states and people's view of these spirits, malevolent or benevolent, whatever it is. There seems to be some sort of tying, or there seems to be some sort of thread between all of these types of things. So even the esoteric religions, or shamanism or whatever it is, there seems to be some sort of thread that ties it all together. And ufology and consciousness and science and all of these things, they tie together in a circle. It's just trying to work it all out. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of the view that I'm going with this. There seems to be some sort of connection between it all. Even human experience, like anomalous experiences. We're capable of so much more than we really realize, and that kind of stuff is starting to be looked into by different scientific groups again. Started at the beginning of the 20th century, and then kind of tapered off. But it seems to be picking up again. 100 years later, we're actually starting to look at it properly again, which is fascinating.
Yeah, going back to the 1930s, you had Upton Sinclair, the very famous author of books like It Can't Happen Here, getting into psychic research, and he'd written a book called Mental Radio. That the foreword was actually written for that book by none other than Albert Einstein. So,
oh wow,
this kind of study goes back quite some ways, and obviously the history of it was followed through and ultimately led to the remote viewing project, which also is a little bit intertwined with all this UFO stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And even things like idealism, sort of different philosophies that state that mind is fundamental, mind comes prior to matter. I mean, I don't know whether this is true, but it's been something that's been taught for thousands of years with different mystery schools or, different esoteric religions, all of this kind of stuff. They all kind of go with this principle first, that your mind, your consciousness, your sense of self comes before anything else that you see. And you're kind of manifesting that to some extent. It might be a battle of wills with you versus everybody else, choosing how things are, all that kind of stuff. But, I don't know whether there's anything really in it, but it's quite an interesting way of looking at the issue, I think. Yeah.
Well, everything we're using to get the show on the road today, whether it's Skype or the software I use to do the upload, or the site like YouTube, or the Twitter site that we all use, or Facebook, which we most of us use anyway. That is all. How can I say it? It all began with an idea. It all began with an idea before it became manifest. So that's what we need more of here on this planet. Some more good ideas. Got to get rid of the bad ones.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and what's funny about you're talking about the internet, it just came to my mind, is that when Jacques Vallée helped develop ARPANET, and that project was actually, which was the predecessor, I guess, to the internet, and the whole concept behind that is a way to manifest the mind beyond the body. That actually was the foundation of that, the thinking, to be able to interface with your mind out there in a way, like in
remote viewing.
The interaction with technology, and being an extension to our mind. But yeah, Jacques Vallée, he was involved with the early remote viewing program before it came classified. Because then I guess he was he wasn't a U.S. citizen, so he wasn't allowed to be properly involved in the program. Who knows if he really was afterwards or not, but he was involved in that as well. But the whole consciousness thing, is considered, I guess, now what they were calling is phenomenology. And that's, the study of phenomena. And, the science on it, too. We had that CIA paper called Anomalous Mental Phenomena. And it was a CIA paper that was done by SEIC.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, that's a 400-page paper discussing, anomalous mental phenomena, these different kind of...
And the paper just says it's real. Do you know what I mean? The conclusions are essentially that it's real.
Absolutely.
So it's fascinating. It kind of blows your mind, really, when you think about it. And there's so much, I've got this book, Varieties and Anomalous Experience. It goes, it's got all these different chapters on these different types of experiences you could have. I don't think anybody or everybody can have every one of them. But, there's this potential that we might have that I think over the next few years we might be able to, look into a little bit more and hopefully get some proper scientific research and objective reviews of some of this stuff so we can, start to prove it in a more realistic manner rather than the subjective study.
Yeah, and being able to maybe measure it in some way or even just to detect it would be a huge headway. And, in the ancient, you were talking about the other, ancient traditions or talking about the old traditions, like Buddhism and the Vedic kind of old Eastern literature is all talking about consciousness pre-meeting matter, that consciousness is the blueprint of the universe and matter is basically built on top of it, manifest out of it. And who knows if that's true? Who knows if that's partially true? But getting to the science and being able to detect this, that's kind of what Gary Nolan is doing with the antenna, is being able to basically physically identify the intuitive process in the human mind. Which, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and what was the put off quote about the I think it was about remote viewing or something like that. That the skeptics, they're looking at 5% of it that's been declassified, and there's this other 95% that's classified that they don't get to see. So it was a pretty telling comment for me.
Oh yeah, there's some comments that people make that's like, oh man, I wish I could really go look at the books and see some of the classified information on this stuff. It's just to know what they know.
I know Uri Geller gets a lot of flack, but for the CIA to have had him draw those pictures, I don't know if you guys have seen them. It's like the grapes. He drew the grapes perfectly, and all these other pictures. Like, I can't discount that. This is another thing that I just started, realizing is real in the last year. But it's real.
Yeah. I just linked to that video because I've watched it several times. The film back at SRI when Putoff and who's Russell Targ were testing him, and of course, it's like I can't. The skeptics are saying that this, he either had something in his tooth, somebody was feeding him information. There was stuff he was doing. I can't explain, like, the way he would cheat to get information. He was amazing. I've never seen anybody that accurate. I've seen people do that before, but he was so accurate. I mean, out of 20 tries, maybe 17, he tried to guess it, and he nailed it. And there was one where they would take a dice, and they'd shake the box, and then with the box closed, he'd have to guess which die, would it have fall on, and the ones that he guessed, he nailed it. So it's like, I see no way that he could have cheated doing that. And as far as the spoon bending, I don't know, because he's always usually holding a spoon. But he's another one that he may have had his really strong abilities back when he was younger. And then when he got older, it might have waned a little bit, and maybe he cheated on some stuff, because there's some stuff where he may have cheated on. So it kind of throws everything into, the skeptics are like, well, he cheated here, so he was a fraud. And I'm like, no, it's not that simple.
Yeah, I don't think he was going in and duping the CIA and some of these bright scientists like they didn't anticipate he might just try to trick them.
Well, they said they were saying that Putoff and Targ just had never had experience with live humans doing that kind of study, so that's why they just weren't ready for whatever tricks he could pull in. That's why Randy got in, and he was a magician, and he warned people, this is what you have to look for. But we all know about Randy.
Yeah. Yeah. But Jacques Vallée, he also relates a story when they were going out for lunch or they went in the cafeteria for lunch in SRI, and they've just finished doing their experiments, and out of nowhere Jacques was like, hey, let's do an experiment, and they just did one off the top of the head, and Jacques Vallée, he actually said, I'm going to try to trick this guy basically, and he picked 2 targets, and sure enough, the guy Uri Geller, he said, this is what I'm getting, and he drew the 2 different things, and he was even amazed, who could have anticipated that he was going to choose 2 things instead of 1 in that particular time. So that's just interesting stuff. That hopefully we'll get more answers on that kind of stuff in the future.
And the other thing, the remote viewing program the programming funding was killed. Similar reasons. They claimed it didn't work, and it was the religious people within the government at the time. They thought it was all the psychic stuff was of the devil, so they killed it. So it's the same people doing the same things with ATIP nowadays. So they've been around for a long time.
And recently, Knapp in the Phenomena radio interview said that he thinks the story of Harry Reid will come out about what he did behind the scenes, as well as the names of some of these haters, basically in the government. So
I hope
that'll be a huge deal.
And that's another reason why this should be moved more to the private sector too, because you wouldn't run into that sort of thing in the private sector with religious types interjecting their own beliefs onto something that needs a closer look.
Definitely. I think you're totally right, Frank. I think the only reason we're going to get this information out at all is through private industry. I'm all for public as well. Do you know what I mean? I think everything should stay, schools and all that kind of stuff should be public. But, when it comes to the analysis of these materials, it's really important that it gets done privately so that the information can be given out, without it being kind of restricted and confidential and all this kind of stuff. It's really, really important that it comes out that way. But quite how far behind we are with the private industry compared to, I don't know, black budgets or whatever else, I guess is the real question.
Yeah, I guess it would take a lot of funding to do it in the private industry. You can't just get defense or government money. But
then we'll be screwed with the FOIAs. So the FOIA guys will go nuts. But hey, it's better than nothing.
Well, and with the FOIAs, it doesn't necessarily work how everybody thinks it does. I mean, even if they're an expert on it, there's some stuff that you can just not get through the Freedom of Information. It won't come out. They don't want it coming out. It's not coming out.
Right.
If there was some kind of crazy major U.S. UFO event that the government just thought was too secret and classified, you can do all the FOIAs you want. It's not coming out.
Yeah, it's just a question of adding FOIA exempt to something, is it not? That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, exactly. So if that, for whatever reason, they want to withhold it because they think it might, they can interpret it as being a threat to national security by being put out there because of methods and information, other kind of sources and things, that they're not going to put it out there. But what is encouraging is that Knapp said that these behind closed door briefings that are taking place in Washington could potentially open up another program.
Yeah, I see a name. I'll run this by everybody, see if they've got anything more on this than I do. A name, Kirk McConnell, is a staffer on one of the Senate committees that might be taking a closer look at this. Anybody hear of this guy yet?
Yeah, he's the one that wrote the Tic Tac Witness. I won't name him because, we all know who he is, but he's the one who wrote him and said, we'd like to meet with you in Washington. We've already interviewed some of the pilots in the Tic Tac case. So he's definitely one of the guys involved. He's a Senate staffer. Hopefully it makes it actually in front of the Senate, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, he's on the Democratic side as well. He's I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think each side can appoint staffers, and they basically work for whoever the Democrat senators are, Congress, representatives as well on the House side. But I think that's how it's set up.
Yeah, that's really, really cool, and I'm wondering if it kind of fit in with that congressional record note as well, if that had something to do with Kirk McConnell and his people.
Yeah, and if more of this stuff comes out, I just can't see how it's not going to be seriously looked at. And even if they do devise another program, I don't think we're necessarily going to get an announcement on the New York Times again saying, "Hey, the government's." There could be one put together right now that we just don't know about. That's a new launch. They're not going to announce it when they create the program because they're going to want to protect the study.
Yeah, the Corbell comment was interesting. The four other groups or four other programs. I kind of wondered, and maybe he made it more clear, and I just didn't get it. But are they ongoing now, or are we talking about previous ones, or we just don't know?
Yeah, that's something I was kind of trying to figure out too. He said that there are four other programs that might see the light of day, and he's pretty sure on that. And go ahead.
No, do you guys see the same? When I see Corbell and Knapp, it's every interview they do with specific shows. Some shows they'll keep it very generic. Like on Coast to Coast, George will keep it very generic when he's interviewed by Nori. But on other shows, you have to listen because every time you listen, they add something new that they didn't talk about before. And I think that's on purpose. It's kind of like a slow release. So they have new stuff to talk about and people get interested and they keep their interest. And I actually like that. And that's why I can't miss this interview because I don't know what they're going to say.
I did get he did an AMA over at Coast to Coast a while back, and I did get the question to him and got an answer too, which was great. That either ATIP or OSAP, he's not sure which, but one of those projects did investigate the Stephenville case, which I think is really interesting. I'm a case junkie from way back, so I'm fascinated with that case, and that was the biggest case that happened while ATIP was operational. And I did want to pin that down, and we do know that now. I'll take Knapp as a good source on that. They did take a look at the Stephenville case, and I do notice that the two cases that are out a little bit through TTSA, the Nimitz case and then the East Coast case from 2015, I believe, were both out over the ocean. And I'm not sure why, but they don't seem to want to play up the fact that they did look at Stephenville. And I love that case. I just think it's a fantastic case.
Didn't he ask Elizondo about that too, or am I misremembering? But I thought he asked him about it, and that was one of, or maybe I'm confusing it with the Skinwalker comment. One of those he asked Elizondo. He said, "Did you look at this?" And then Elizondo just said yes, and he didn't elaborate at all. He just said yes.
Yeah, if that did happen, I missed it.
Maybe that was for Skinwalker.
Could be. As far as I know, that was one that I really wanted to find out about. Like, what was a really good case that happened while these guys were up and running? And that was the case. And it's a really good case because when I first got into this, it was just kind of dying down. It had already happened when I got into this seriously. But, man, there was a lot of chatter about it back in still. It was a 2008 case, but there was still a lot going on with it. A lot of new stuff coming out back in 2009 when I first got serious about all this.
And didn't they follow one of the radar tracks they were able to get was shown that one of the craft headed towards George W. Bush's ranch? Is that true, Frank?
I don't know if it was headed towards it, but Erath County is pretty close to where Bush lived. I think he was in Crawford County, which might be the next county over. I'd have to look at a map again. But they did. Robert Powell and Glenn Schultz, when they were working for MUFON, they were able to file a FOIA and get the radar reports from the area. I guess they had some multiple witnesses at multiple locations seeing something very big and very fast. And apparently they got a radar return of something that had a wingspan maybe up to a little over 500 feet and was traveling at 2,000 miles an hour. So that on radar, that is a very interesting radar return.
That was yet another case where I was right by it and I missed it. I was in DFW, and that was going on, like an hour and a half away from me. And then in the 90s, I was in Tucson when the Phoenix lights were happening, and that's why.
Oh, no way!
Barely missed that one too. Yeah.
Did you get to see anything?
No, I've never seen anything. No, but supposedly the mothership flew right up the freeway, and I was like right next to the freeway. If only I was outside.
Jeez. Yeah.
Did you know anybody who got to see anything?
Not directly. It became such a huge story. I'm sure if I tracked down, it would have been like a friend of a friend of a friend or something. But no, I don't really have any cool stories about it. But being in Arizona at the time, it was nuts. I mean, it made worldwide news, but especially in Arizona, it was like a huge deal. And Stephenville was a big deal out here in Texas too.
Sure it was. Yeah, I remember that well. That was a fun case. I mean, a lot of good witnesses came forward on the civilian side, but we really don't have anything too much from the military side, and that's why I was really curious about it. And I'm glad I found it. It was more or less the answer that I expected, but it's nice to get confirmation from a source as good as George Knapp.
I have a question.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I have a question for Jay, but let finish this. It's on another topic, so go ahead, James. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's, talking about the cases, it was interesting that both Chris Mellon and Jeremy Corbell had mentioned that on the East Coast in 2015 alone, that there were over a dozen tic-tac type incidents, and of course I was speculated that we might get some of that data in January, February, but go ahead.
I was going to ask Jay his theory that a lot of this stuff is crypto-terrestrial. Do you think maybe they have a lot to do, or at least partial to do, with cattle mutilations, checking the environment?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, obviously, I don't know anything. I can't speak in absolute terms about any of it, but I would hazard a guess that, yeah, I mean, they must be looking at biological tissues or, kind of matter, material, and all that kind of stuff. So presumably, that's why they would be performing cattle mutilations. But obviously, I don't have any kind of inside information about it.
Right.
That would be that's how I would imagine they would be, or what they would be interested in. They would come here, they would look at different plants, they would look at different animals, they look at the humans. For whatever reason, they don't seem to very often hurt people, as far as I understand. I think there's been a few cases in the past where people have been mutilated. I think they've had all their blood drained and horrible things happen to them. But I think it's a very, very rare thing. Quite the reason why, I have no idea, but it's quite interesting. And whether or not there's a fully connection between near-death experiences as well, and some of these other environments where some of these things, the other, whatever you want to call it, is coming from, there might be some sort of a connection there. But I'm just kind of hypothesizing, really.
And Knapp, Mr. Knapp recently said also in that same interview that I guess it was Bass, or maybe it was OSAP, but I think it was Bass. We're working with other friendly governments around the world, and one of them was Brazil, and that was in regards to Claris Island, which there was injuries there, and that's just kind of one of the big examples we point to when we're thinking about human injuries.
Like injuries
from one as well, isn't it?
Go ahead, sorry.
So I was going to say there's a place, I think, is it in Norway or Denmark or something like that? Where
the lights?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that's in Norway.
Norway, got it, yeah. One of those sort of northern European countries. Yeah, they seem to have these lights that happen. I think it's a similar kind of situation to Skinwalker Ranch, but I don't think people get hurt as far as I'm aware. They just kind of see these lights. It seems to manifest in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's bizarre.
It's the nice lights.
That's a good one. Yeah. I like that. The nice lights.
I went to Norway. I didn't get a chance to go to Hessdalen though, unfortunately.
Well, Jay, you're closest, Jay, so you got to get over there and get a report.
That would be awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, Jay traveling to Norway is like me traveling to Pittsburgh. It's not that hard, dude. Come on.
Yeah.
You got to go.
No, Danny.
Gary. No, I was going to say Gary Nolan had posited that, that these could be different phenomenon, and they're different, just like we're different as people. And, some people having the negative encounters might just be encountering a negative aspect of the phenomenon. But a question I wanted to ask Jay is, for the crypto intelligence, would you think that is technological?
I think it would have to be, yes. If they're kind of coming through into our environment, I don't know whether it's technology in the way that we have it. It might be some sort of manifestation in a different kind of way. That they would have. Okay,
that's kind of where I was going, because different people have said, like Dr. Greer says, they can manifest things through advanced consciousness, and that's why some of the materials and everything are so pure and seamless, because their technology is so advanced that they can just manifest it somehow. I guess through some kind of augmented consciousness, but they'd have to be using some materials, I would think. But
what if they perfected the whole mind being fundamental, and that would suggest that they can manifest them that way potentially. But it's you can only kind of guess at this stuff. But what you were saying earlier about some of them being good, some of them being bad, I think it makes perfect sense. If you were to get some sort of intelligence come to Earth and they were to look at people, generally, you would probably assume humans are bad. They kill lots of different things. They kill each other. They're constantly killing. There's lots of bloodshed, lots of killing. So let's just assume they're all bad. But the reality of the case is it's completely different. There's lots of really good people, 50-50, something like that. You've got some really wonderful people. We've got some really bad people. So I think the same would be true for any kind of other intelligence. There's probably bound to be good parts to it and bad parts to it. Whether or not they're parts of the same thing, I don't know. Or whether or not there's sort of good thing, which is a different thing to the bad thing, which is kind of what the Bible says. You've got the good and bad angels. I don't know whether that plays a part or whether it's all one thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. That makes a lot of sense.
In one of the older interviews with the ranch owner, Terry Sherman, he said that when they moved their cattle to a certain area really close to the house where they were living, the mutilations didn't happen. They never lost one cow, which is really odd to me. Have you guys heard anybody else talk about that? It was just the one interview he did with Linda Moulton Howe back, I think it was 96.
I've not heard that.
Yeah, and I was like, really? So whatever is causing it was not able to do a mutilation if the cattle were close to the house? It's really odd.
Yes, I wonder if it's being observed, something like that. If it's easily able to be seen, maybe they wouldn't do the mutilation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, what are we looking at going forward there, fellas? A lot of talk about we're going to get some significant data drops after the first of the year, after the midterms wrap up, and maybe after the holidays this year. Is that about what everybody else is hearing? Top of the year, we'll start getting some more stuff in big volume?
Yeah.
It seems like it.
Yeah, we're hearing about new videos coming out. That's one thing that's being speculated by the MUFON guy, saying that Elizondo had said, I think that there might be some more videos coming out that are even better and clearer than the Go Fast gimbal and Tic Tac videos. That's one thing.
Which we know they exist as well. We've gotten comments from Fravor and all these other people, so they do exist. But will we see them?
And even the New York Times.
We've got 4 CDs, though. That melon leak as well, they had 4 CDs. Presumably, at least 3 of them would have been full of data, unless they're copying different parts or different things. One might be Skinwalker Ranch, or one might be the Nimitz incident on one CD. I don't know how they sort of do this stuff, but there's going to be, you talk about having 600 to 700 megabytes in each one of those discs. Each one of those videos that they released were about 9 meg in size. You can get hundreds of those videos on those.
Hey, they could have been Blu-rays.
It did say
50
CDR.
That's
CDR.
50 gigs. So we also have the Project Adam materials where, a few people had said that come around December, January, February, there was going to be an initial announcement about it, talking about whatever progress there is, or, some kind of tidbit of information that's progressive, talking about that study. I had also heard that somebody from somebody close to TTSA that's loosely affiliated with them. I guess you can say they're a friend of Tom's. He had also confirmed that to me, and now Knapp has said it. So I think that's something that we got to look forward to for sure. And these the materials that Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan are studying and looking at, that is also coming out sometime next year. There's going to be a paper on it. And there's also going to be a peer-reviewed paper on this antenna stuff. In fact, Gary Nolan is giving a presentation in a few weeks to an extremely prestigious university. It's pretty shocking, actually. And the way he kind of got looped into it was that he was speaking to somebody from that university, and they were open to these concepts and ideas. But the way it's going to be presented to the university, he's not going to be talking about the phenomenon and extraterrestrials or anything like that, but it's going to be presented in a way of talking about the antenna. So there's going to be something on that put out as well as the papers. So that's another big thing that's going to happen next year, and seems for certain.
And there's been some really big foreshadowing from Elizondo, and he's usually, to me, is usually really reserved. So when he does the foreshadowing stuff, I get excited. Like he said, the conversation would change in the next year. He said that at the MUFON conference. So that was a big comment from him, I think. And then also on Coast to Coast, he was talking to George Knapp, and he was talking about the fleet that is mentioned. And he said, that none of that would come out from him. But to me, it seemed like he was alluding that maybe we would get another drop from the Pentagon on that. Like, I don't know if that's the case. These are just all options. But for him to really focus on the fleet like that, to me, it was a clue.
I mean, he said that well, I don't remember exact words. He said it would be an aha moment if the details of the gimbal come out. And
exactly,
all we need is just one of the gimbal pilots, just one willing to talk and just tell us exactly what happened. And I know there were other engagements supposedly, but just one would be amazing to see, because then we could put to rest the Mick West argument that they were chasing a plane. It's like, if we know what happened in the rest of the engagement, we can, we could say, sorry, that did not happen. They caught up to it, or they couldn't catch up to it, or what else happened.
Yeah, and Melinda Leslie says that she has allegedly some of these witnesses from some East Coast Go Faster gimbal events, and we're hearing rumors about maybe some of these other witnesses from in other ways being talked into coming forward. So that kind of sounds like it's coming.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely like to know more about that case. That looks like a good case as well. I've already got Nimitz up in my top 10 all time, so but there's room for more,
And we should get the SEU report on the Tic Tac, which is supposed to be a huge report as far as pages. That should be coming any day now, in the next couple of days, couple of weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the James Fox UFO documentary with Lee Spiegel as one of the producers, that's supposed to be coming out soon too. I'm not exactly sure what he mentioned the month, but I forget. I think it might have been this fall, and hopefully he may have some amazing stuff in there too.
Let's hope so.
They're toting that they did. They did a talk on the podcast UFO,
right?
And they were making some serious claims that this is going to be a pretty profound movie. And I don't think they're doing it just like, oh, we're promoting the movie.
No, he's not like that.
James Fox and Lee Spiegel, Lee Spiegel was involved with the UN in this topic. So,
right.
They're somebody that, they really want to make a change in this. So I think that we can expect some big stuff in there.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to drop off.
Okay.
It's getting quite late for me.
Okay, Jay.
Actually, I was going to say too, I gotta cut out soon too.
Okay.
Maybe you want to wrap this up, Frank?
Yeah, we can wrap this up. Any final words from anybody before we do?
I just want to say I'm so happy that we got this done. I love our Twitter circle. I think we have great camaraderie, and we share some great information together, and piece different information together and kind of put out these different ideas. So thank you guys so much for doing all the work that you do and putting the information out and sharing the information, and for coming on here too and discussing it with us.
It's been a lot of fun. I really like you guys. I really hold you guys in high regards. And man, it's been a real fun talk.
Yeah, let's go through our Twitter handles again. I'm at UFO Sunday. James, what's your Twitter handle?
Engaging the Phenomenon.
Okay, easy enough to find. Jay, you want to go ahead and give your Twitter with all the numbers again? So folks at home, get your pens and papers handy and write this down.
Hope you're all ready. So it's J097844691.
Got it. Okay, and I'm following you now over on Twitter. Joe Murgia, you want to give your Twitter handle?
It's UFO Joe11, and the website is ufojoe.net.
Got it. And Danny, you want to go with your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is Silva Record, SILVARECORD, and that'll be also the name of the website as soon as it launches.
There we go. Okay, so we got all our Twitter handles out there. Then any final words from anybody? Any final thoughts?
Thank you so much for setting this up.
Yes.
It's been incredible, man. I really love you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I
real
appreciate
pleasure.
that.
Thanks.
Yeah, same here.
We love you too, Danny.
Yeah, Danny's the man. We're gonna be doing it. We got to do this again. We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, this was
I'd
fun
love
to
to.
put together, kind of quick and dirty, but we got everybody in. We can handle 3 guests at one time, plus me and James. So we set a new record here in terms of the most people we've ever had on a show. This was fantastic. And I'm going to wrap it up. Goodbye from Philly. This is Frank Stalter here, and James.
I'm out of here too. Thank you, everybody, for coming. James from New York.
Okay,
Take care,
have
guys.
a nice evening, everybody. Have a good one, and thanks for tuning in. James, we've got some good guests coming up, don't we? I know you can't talk too much about it. We got some good guests. So, okay, I'm going to end the feed now, and have a great week, everybody.